Chapter 61. 1 against 20. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 61. 1 against 20. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Chapter 61. 1 against 20. The entrance to Hunter Spirit Hill was a narrow canyon. The crossroad was only as wide as 3 to 4 people, with cliffs on both sides. The 4 IDs with the prefix fire in front of them were surrounding the narrow entrance. 2 level 8 mages, a level 9 warrior, and a level 7 priest. From the looks of it, his level could be considered second tier. But without exception, their IDs were all red. This was the rule of red names in the Divine Domain. If a player took the initiative to attack a player from the same faction, their ID would be red no matter where they were. If a player was killed under the red name state, they would lose even more experience and money, and equipment would definitely drop after death. The more people maliciously attacked and killed players, the more obvious the redness of the ID would be, and the more severe the punishment would be. In his previous life, many big guilds plotted to turn their enemies into a red name state before killing them. The players who were plotted against would basically drop many levels and equipment. As the god of war in his previous life, McCrae had naturally been plotted against before. However, those players who thought they were hunters died at McCrae's hands in the end. During that battle, McCrae couldn't remember how many people he had killed, except that his name had turned black. The identity of hunter and prey was constantly changing. If the prey was strong enough, the prey would become the hunter. Ignorant hunters would become prey. Just like now. McCrae had already hidden behind a rock and was quietly looking at the 4 people not far in front of him. And these 4 didn't know that the danger was already close. The highest level warrior held a level 5 black iron longsword and complained softly. I wonder how McCrae offended our boss George. He actually ordered the top 20 guild members to ambush here. After that, the priest at the side also took out his staff and echoed boredly. That's right. Shouldn't our mission be to get a silver grade drop as soon as possible and then form a guild? After that, the 4 of them looked at each other helplessly, and the remaining 2 mages continued. Forget it, just do whatever the boss says. However, speaking of which, is McCrae really as powerful as the rumors say? Is there a need to send so many people? At this point, the level .9 warrior snorted disdainfully and continued. Humph, so what if they're powerful? Those 2 knights are already more than 10 levels. Their equipment is even better, but is it useful? Under the siege of 20 of us, didn't they still get killed by 1 level and escape with their tails between their legs? When the priest heard that, he was also excited. His mind was filled with the scene of them ganging up on the 2 high-end knights. Then, he continued excitedly, that's right. Who cares if McCrae is there? No matter how powerful he is, he's just one person. Why should the 20 of us be afraid of him? The moment that was said, the 4 of them laughed loudly. 1 against 20. Funny, unless this McCrae wasn't human. Yet. What they didn't know was that in the domain of the Divine Domain, McCrae couldn't be called an ordinary person. He was the one and only god of war in this Divine Domain world. At the same time, McCrae, who was hiding behind the huge rock, heard the conversation between the 4 of them clearly. McCrae only had one word to say about the thoughts of these 4 people. Naive. Apart from the fact that the players had only entered the game for more than a week, they were all newbies and generally not very strong. Even in his previous life, in the middle and late stages of the Divine Domain, McCrae was also an existence that could fight 100 alone. Looking at the 4 people who were laughing loudly in front of him, McCrae didn't have any hatred in his heart. After all, the current Divine Domain was just a game. Still, since this fire group had provoked McCrae, he definitely wouldn't sit back and do nothing. The corners of McCrae's mouth curled up as he said softly to himself, then I'll play with you guys. After that, McCrae carefully examined the equipment on the four of them. They were basically all black iron equipment and even some whiteboard equipment. In just an instant, McCrae had a rough idea of their attributes. Then, McCrae held the novice dagger in his right hand and silently entered stealth mode, slowly moving towards the four people in front of him. At this moment, as McCrae advanced cautiously, he was getting closer and closer to the four players. He was almost 10 yards away. Priests and mages with high intelligence had extremely high senses. They were very sensitive to stealth skills. But they did not feel anything about McCrae's advancement. It was not only because McCrae's attributes were much higher than theirs, but also because McCrae's mastery of stealth had reached an amazing level. 10 yards. 9 yards. 5 yards. At such a close distance, McCrae could even see every expression on their faces clearly. McCrae's expression was calm. He only stared at the warrior in front of him and calculated the distance. It was here. Then, a fierce look flashed in McCrae's eyes, and he directly shouted softly, "Switch weapons, Limitless." Whoosh! Just as he finished speaking, the novice dagger in McCrae's hand immediately changed into the bronze sharp longsword, Limitless, sword form. The moment the novice dagger disappeared, McCrae's stealth mode was deactivated, and his black robe immediately appeared in front of the four of them. Seeing this mysterious black-robed man who suddenly appeared, the warrior of the Fire Guild immediately revealed a puzzled expression. He was about to ask who McCrae was, but it was too late. Like a leopard that had been waiting for a long time, McCrae suddenly leaped up, raised the sword in his hand, and stabbed at this person. "Be careful." When the priest standing far away saw this, he immediately cried out. At the same time, the priest quickly waved the staff in his hand and shouted, "Secondary heal." A green halo with fluorescent light immediately floated towards the warrior. As for the two mages, they were clearly still in a daze. Seeing this situation, McCrae thought more highly of the priest. "Yo, not bad. But that's it for now." In the next second, McCrae's longsword had already stabbed the warrior's neck, and an exaggerated damage number floated above his head. .896. Instant kill. Plop, his entire body immediately slammed heavily into the ground. Then, he slowly turned incorporeal and disappeared from the spot. Only the black iron longsword that dropped remained. McCrae picked up the sword and put it in his backpack. After all, they were about to establish a guild, and this guild warehouse was still a problem. It was best to earn as much as possible now. Chapter 62. Change form. Limitless, gun. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 62. Change form. Limitless, gun. Chapter 62. Change form. Limitless, gun. At this moment, McCrae's ID also turned pale red. System. You were the first to attack the players of the same faction. You have entered the red.name state. You will be severely punished if you die. After the battle, you can escape the red.name state by killing monsters. Red name. After hearing the system's notification, McCrae chuckled. Other people might be afraid of the red.name state, but he wasn't. In his previous life, his red name was almost normal. At this moment, the remaining 3 players of the Fire Guild were completely stunned, including the priest who had reacted quickly at the start. 896, instant kill. This was a level 9 high defense warrior with many black iron armor and 35 defense points. Who was this mysterious black-robed man in front of him? McCrae didn't say anything else and used heroic charge again. In the next moment, McCrae was immediately enveloped by a red light and rushed towards the mage on his left. The 2 mages finally recovered from their shock. They hurriedly took out the staff in their hands and hurriedly shouted, explosive fire ring. This was a very useful life-saving skill in the early stage of the elementalist class. It could effectively block some advancement methods. But what made them despair was McCrae didn't care about the explosive fire ring that caused an explosive amount of damage in the early stage. Instead of retreating, he advanced and forcefully endured this damage skill. He continued to rely on his high movement speed under the charge state to charge towards the mage on the left. The long sword in his hand was raised again, and he stabbed straight at the mage's chest. These two mages had originally hoped that this explosive fire ring could slightly stop McCrae's charge, but they didn't expect McCrae to be so decisive. 48, a damage number floated above McCrae's head. The damage of less than 50 shocked the two mages. How could they not know the power of the explosive fire ring? Even on the warriors of the first tier, this damage would exceed 100. However, it was less than 50 on McCrae. This wasn't a fireball. How was this possible? But in the next moment, a huge number floated above the head of a mage. 672. It was just one strike. McCrae killed a mage. Even the priest with the fastest reaction didn't have time to heal his teammates. Seeing McCrae's ferocity, the priest immediately shouted, "Run! I'll heal you." Just as the priest finished speaking, a healing halo appeared on the mage's body. The mage's health was still full. However, if he didn't use it in advance, this mage would also be slashed to death with a sword. Upon hearing the priest's voice, the mage reacted. But the distance between the two mages was too close. McCrae stabbed one to death with his sword, completely ignoring the equipment that dropped, his feet not stopping at all. At a distance of a few yards, McCrae didn't need to use his technique. The speed provided by the pair of wind-chasing boots was already enough. He could feel McCrae's murderous aura. The mage immediately retreated. However, mages were slow to begin with. How could he escape? 980. A huge damage appeared on the mage's head. The mage immediately died. When the mage was stabbed to death by McCrae previously, the damage was only 672. Not that McCrae hadn't done enough damage. It was because that mage only had so much health. The reason why this mage's damage was 980. It was all because of the priest's halo effect. Seeing the huge damage, the priest in the distance immediately ran. He did not hesitate at all. Yes. His healing halo did have the effect of increasing his health to the maximum. But was that useful? In front of absolute strength, this was completely useless. Running was the only thing he should do now. Furthermore, even with the healing halo, his health still couldn't reach 980. This meant that he wasn't even enough to withstand a single slash from McCrae. However, the cautious priest still used a few skills on himself. A colorful light began to appear on his body. And then there was McCrae. Looking at the running priest, he was in no hurry. After picking up the equipment and gold coins dropped by the two mages, he looked at the priest who could run. Change forms. Limitless, gun. McCrae said calmly. The sharp sword in his hand immediately turned into a bronze flintlock. Lifting his hand, McCrae barely aimed. Looking at the direction the priest was running in, he subconsciously predicted his positioning. Bang! The sound of the flintlock echoed in the canyon. Unfortunately, no damage number appeared above the priest's head. Clearly, McCrae's shot had missed. Seems like I have to familiarize myself with this weapon. As he muttered to himself, McCrae fired again. The speed of a flintlock was slightly slower than a bow. But it was much more powerful. However, this was not the reason why McCrae changed his flintlock form. After all, even if it were just an arrow, the HP of a priest couldn't withstand the shot. He just wanted to try. The reason was simple. When the priest not far away heard the sound of the flintlock, he subconsciously wanted to look back. However, he suppressed his thoughts. If he turned back, he might not be able to escape. But even if he didn't turn around, would he be able to escape? Bang! The sound of the flintlock appeared again. But the next moment, the priest's body pounced onto the ground. At the same time, a huge damage number appeared above his head. 1024. Looking at the damage number, a faint smile appeared on McRae's face. This priest is pretty smart. Unfortunately, this health isn't my limit. Of course, McRae knew what the priest was thinking. He used skills and potions to increase his health. All so that he wouldn't be killed by McRae. Unfortunately, his plan failed. If your defense is a little higher, that's still possible. McRae commented. Grabbing the priest's equipment, McRae walked into the canyon. Assassination was already impossible. The sound of the flintlock was not a key factor. As long as someone died, the members of the Fire Guild would immediately know. At this moment, McRae had changed his mind. Rather than assassinate them, it was better to just kill his way in. Anyway, this wasn't a difficult task. Besides, if he attracted attention, Barton would be much safer. As they were killed, they immediately reported the situation. And at this moment, on the other side, in the chat within the Fire Guild, the four of them immediately sent a signal. McRae is here. His attack power is extremely high. None of us can withstand a single strike from him. Don't kill him alone. You have to join forces. All four of you are dead. They're all dead. Trash. Chapter 63. McRae's stealth skill. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 63. McRae's stealth skill. The information sent by the four of them was immediately known by the people from the Fire Guild. However, not long after, the atmosphere in the chat channel changed. The few of you are not even level 10. It's naturally easy for McRae to kill you. That's right. In my opinion, the four of you are scared stiff by the rumors. Second-rate players will always be second-rate. No matter how strong McRae is, it's impossible for him to insta-kill us. It's easy to kill you. If he wants to kill me, I doubt he can break through my defense. Ha ha ha. The other players of the Fire Guild were chatting casually. However, the leader did not lower his guard. After asking for damage, he gave the command. All of you listen up. This operation must be done according to my orders. If anyone doesn't listen to my orders, get the hell out of the Fire Guild. At the same time, hand over your equipment. You are indeed the best team of our Fire Guild, but you've seen McRae's strength. Lastly, his damage value has reached more than 1,000. Do I need to say any more about this damage? So this time, the leader suppressed everyone's thoughts. After explaining their thoughts, the other players understood the leader's thoughts. They all agreed. At the same time, the battle method began to change. More than 10 people agreed to gather. They even used voice communication. The leader knew very well. According to the president's request, a silver weapon must drop from McRae this time. If he couldn't kill McRae, then it was a small matter if these 20+ people died. The problem would be his status and reputation. Therefore, the leader attached great importance to the guild's mission. Back to McRae. After killing the four of them, he no longer hid. He walked into Hunter Spirit Hill with his weapon. He had just passed through the entrance of the valley when the system's call notification came. System. Friend Barton, requesting a call. Barton, what's wrong? President, I've discovered that the members of the Fire Guild are gathering. They seem to have discovered you. Yes. I killed a few of their players. Captain, from the looks of it, they seem to want to attack you directly. Leave quickly. Captain. Ignore me. Just find a chance to leave. McRae hung up. The gathering of the Fire Guild was not a big deal to McRae. Upon hearing Barton say that, McRae's heart didn't even waver. Not that McRae was crazy. He was just confident. Besides, it was a good thing that the other party had gathered together. This time, it was them who were in the open and him who was in the dark. Let's assassinate a few support players first. McRae muttered and switched the weapon in his hand to a dagger. Then, his figure disappeared at the entrance of the valley. The remaining members of the Fire Guild gathered together. Besides, they were close to Barton. This was their plan. Barton seemed to be just a bait to lure McRae. If McRae didn't know, so be it. But if he knew, he had to come. After all, McRae had already told the public that he wanted to establish a guild. And his own people were in danger. As long as he knew about it. Then he had to save him. Meanwhile, 4 people from the Fire Guild had died. And it was McRae who killed it. This meant that he already knew about this. But if he didn't come, then he, McRae, would be labeled as a player who had abandoned his guild. Once this label was confirmed, this guild would basically be impossible to establish. After all, most players didn't like such a guild leader. McRae had to come. He had to come. Therefore, when the members of the Fire Guild gathered together, they didn't panic at all. He wasn't afraid that McRae wouldn't come. At this moment, McRae had already sneaked close to them. His footsteps were very stable. Even if he stepped on the withered leaves, there would be no sound. As for the fresh grass, it was even more silent. At this moment, it was as if McRae had been possessed by a cat. He maximized the effect of stealth. Looking at the members of the Fire Guild gathered together from afar, McRae's face did not reveal any expression. McRae's eyes narrowed slightly. An expert. Unfortunately, it's useless against me. McRae's stealth effect continued. He slowly approached the team. As everyone was gathered together, most of the players relaxed. Everyone felt very safe. But at this moment, a damage number suddenly flew out of the crowd. 922. Then, a priest fell to the ground. Soon, the corpse disappeared. Everyone immediately reacted. This. Why is this priest dead? Is it an archer? What happened? F***ck. This damage. It's the rogue's stealth move, focus. Priest, buff us. What are you waiting for? Following the shout of a teammate, a holy priest immediately released a dazzling light. A strong light flew up from the team. It exploded above everyone's heads. The intense light would temporarily break the rogue's invisibility effect. Everyone was carefully observing the situation nearby. Yet, the brilliant skill seemed to have lost its effect. No one saw McRae. It was as if he wasn't the one who killed that player. At this moment, the leader realized that the situation was bad and immediately gave the order. McRae is here. Protect the back line. Knight, warrior, enter defensive mode. Rogues, move out. Don't stop using the shadow image skill. Immediately warn us if you find him. As the first tier players, they quickly moved. Reveal skills were released one after another. The rogues also entered stealth mode. The defensive formation was immediately pulled up. Everyone entered a state. At this moment, as long as they discovered McRae's figure, countless skills would instantly be thrown out. The leader was undoubtedly very strong. Everyone was instantly safe. But, the leader ignored a problem. They were indeed safe in the open. But were the rogues who went out to find McRae safe? At this moment, at the edge of the clearing, Barton was hiding on a huge maple tree. He looked at the priest who had just died and couldn't help but widen his eyes. McRae must have been the one who killed that priest. However, once he made a move, a figure should appear. Noel, however, Barton, who could observe the entire scene, didn't see McRae. How did he do that? Barton scratched his head in confusion, his thoughts surging. But at this moment, a damage number suddenly appeared beside the tree. 891. Chapter 64. McCrae's Stealth Skill. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 64. McCrae's Stealth Skill. 891. This red number appeared beside Barton. He immediately looked down the tree. A corpse slowly appeared, and equipment dropped from the ground. Although it wasn't far, the leaves of the maple tree blocked most of Barton's vision. But he could still tell that it was a dagger. It was a rogue's weapon. Under Barton's gaze, a hand suddenly appeared. After getting the equipment, the hand immediately disappeared. This, he could only reveal one hand in stealth. What was going on? Rogues could reach this level of stealth. The question marks in Barton's head increased. However, he was very glad. Because he knew very well that this rogue below was killed by Captain McCrae. Such a powerful rogue was thankfully on his side. If the enemy had such a rogue, the consequences would be unimaginable. He stopped thinking about it. He immediately held his breath, afraid that the people from the Fire Guild would discover him. The maple tree where Barton was only a yard away from the rogue's death. If the members of the Fire Guild looked up slightly, Barton would immediately be discovered. However, the people from the Fire Guild didn't look too much. No one even came to check on the situation. The leader of the Fire Guild immediately changed his battle plan. All rogues, retreat immediately and return to our position. All reveal skills, release. Cover for your teammates. Following the leader's orders, a few figures quickly appeared on the grassland. They could no longer care about stealth. After all, if even the rogues in stealth could be discovered by McCrae, then their stealth would be meaningless. At the start, almost everyone in the Fire Guild thought that McCrae would definitely die if he encountered them. But now, McCrae had killed 2 people silently. This made them panic. They were all red names. If they died, not only would they lose experience, they would also drop equipment. At this time, equipment was undoubtedly very important. Rogues were extremely fast. Furthermore, they had escaped stealth. Therefore, they felt that McCrae, who was still in stealth mode, would definitely not be able to catch up to them. Under such circumstances, it was impossible for them to die. In the quiet valley, apart from the sounds of a few reveal skills, there was no other movement. As if seeing that the valley was too quiet, the wind began to stir. The grass on the ground gradually bent down. As the wind blew past, waves rose on the grass. Looking at the situation in the valley, the leader immediately frowned. In this game, he'd seen plenty of grass waves before. However, the appearance of the grass wave undoubtedly gave McCrae a chance. He no longer had to care about the footprints in his stealth. Besides, his voice would be covered. Indeed. Just as the leader finished his thought, a red number immediately appeared on his left side. 881. Another rogue teammate fell. A piece of leather armor immediately dropped. Get him. The leader immediately gave the order. Actually, without his order, the mages had already released their skills. Fast ice cones, large dot-scale fireballs, wind blades. They bombarded the place where the rogue had died. However, these skills had no other use other than wasting a portion of their MP. Not a single damage number appeared. It was as if McCrae hadn't appeared there. This, seeing his teammates attack, the leader's expression turned bad. The attack just now had almost no delay. Furthermore, that rogue was very close to the protective circle. And in this situation, they still couldn't touch the corner of McCrae's shirt. This didn't make sense. But at this moment, everyone was still paying attention to the situation over there when a priest in the circle suddenly died. 877, a bright red number suddenly appeared above their heads. F***CK. What's going on? Why is Sama dead? Quick, look around. Is McCrae already beside us? The priest died without warning. It felt like he had encountered a curse and suddenly died. Only after the priest fell to the ground did a few people react. This time, everyone's nerves were pulled. Even the calm leader looked around frantically. It seemed like he wanted to find McCrae's traces. But how could they find any traces of McCrae? The wind at this moment was McCrae's backer. As long as the wind was around, this team would not be able to find him. The death of this priest. It was as if a basin of cold water had fallen on their heads. This situation made their hearts tighten. The people in the circle were actually dead. How was this possible? There was no gap in this protective circle. Almost all the players were leaning against each other. How did McCrae get in? Everyone couldn't understand. The leader looked at the situation and scratched his head hard. Even though his scalp was almost scratched out, he still couldn't figure it out. All warriors, activate taunt as soon as you sense any traces. The shadow image skill cannot be stopped. Everyone focus on your corresponding direction. The leader gave the order again. McCrae attacked again and again. It made everyone panic. Most importantly, no one had found McCrae. This was very terrifying. They were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered, with no room for resistance. At this moment, the role of the team leader appeared. If he didn't say anything, the other players would definitely be frightened by McCrae's ferocity. Once they panicked, this team would lose their effect. And with the leader, they could once again condense combat strength. These people were all above level 10. Their talent was naturally higher than ordinary people. Otherwise, the Fire Guild wouldn't have focused on nurturing them. As if they were too afraid, a murderous aura condensed in their midst. At most, I'll die. What's there to be afraid of? If I drop my level, I'll just practice again. You're not qualified to scare me. I can even kill a big boss that's more than 10 meters long, why would I be afraid of a player like you? If you're so good, you better don't let me discover you. The voices of the players became louder and louder. At this moment, they seemed to have overcome their fear. As long as they discovered McCrae, they would definitely risk their lives. At this moment, at the edge of the clearing, a smile appeared on McCrae's face when he heard the roar of the Fire Guild. He knew that he had achieved his goal. Chapter 65. Iron Bucket Formation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 65. Iron Bucket Formation. Chapter 65. Iron Bucket Formation. He had defeated more than 10 people alone. McCrae used to do this kind of thing often. However, at that time, it was because his attributes and equipment were higher than ordinary players. So he could stand in an invincible position. And now, McCrae was very experienced. However, his equipment level was not high. If the skills of more than 10 people were all aimed at his face, his defense and HP would not be able to hold on. So he adopted a mental strategy. McCrae had used this strategy many times in the past. He was very knowledgeable about this. The roars of the players from the Fire Guild. He had almost gotten sick of hearing such words in the past. And hearing these words again, a familiar feeling flowed out. At this moment, he could already sense fear from the emotions of these players. They were just holding on. However, this fear was not enough. After all, the ones he had killed previously were all fragile. The fear of those warriors and knights was in vain. They still had the thought that their defense was very strong. McCrae knew that very well. It was already a little difficult to break through this iron bucket array. He had to think of a way to attract their attention. As he carefully observed this group of people, McCrae's brain worked rapidly. After observing for a while, he felt that something was wrong. 15 people. After counting the number of people in the Fire Guild, McCrae realized that something was wrong. He had only killed 3 people. 2 rogues and 1 priest. And in this iron bucket array, there should be 16 people. There was still a rogue who hadn't returned. Where could this rogue be? McCrae, who was in stealth mode, began to carefully observe his surroundings. McCrae knew the strength of the Fire Guild very well in his previous life. At that time, the 4 guilds had already occupied the mainstream. Fire Guild was one of them. However, the server had just opened. The capital of the Fire Guild would naturally attract a large number of players. No matter what, at this point in time, Fire Guild was the ceiling of this game. Those who could enter their sites naturally had a certain level of strength. As the leader of this team, Hux's ability was obvious. McCrae's strength did shock him. However, he did not panic. The rogue who did not return was deliberately left outside. This kind of thought of hiding something was usually not thought of by ordinary people when their team was attacked. And Hux still used this plan. At this moment, on the surface, Hux was placating the other teammates to stimulate their fighting spirit. At the same time, he was communicating with the rogue outside. Have you discovered McCrae? Not yet, but I just discovered an abnormal grass shadow about 20 yards from your right hand. Hide well. Don't expose yourself. Understood. Whether or not you can get this silver grade, you're the key. As soon as he sent this message, Hux received an urgent message from the rogue. Captain, your front. Looking at the rogue's message, Hux didn't hesitate at all and immediately released a thunder whirl. The light blue lightning looked very beautiful. However, the attack power of this skill wasn't low. Furthermore, this skill could be instantly cast. In the early stages, this skill was considered a divine skill for elementalists. All the grass that had been swept up along the way had turned into charcoal. If he were to be struck by this lightning, not only would McCrae receive a large amount of attacks, at the same time, his stealth would be broken. Seeing Hux's attack, the 2 warriors in front of him immediately activated Taunt in the air. The 2 mages also threw out an area of effect skill. Unfortunately, all their skills missed. There was nothing on the grass except charcoal. Hux wasn't discouraged when he didn't see the damage. He knew McCrae's strength very well. After all, there was a delay in the rogue's typing. Unless it was discovered by him himself, it was very common for the attack to miss. Stay alert. As Hux spoke, his eyes were fixed on the empty space in front of him. The sound of the wind constantly affected their hearing. As if this game were all helping McCrae. Hux had just finished speaking. A red number flew up from the short slope in the distance. 799. Another 1-hit kill. Hux had previously said to pay attention to their surroundings. However, because their teammate had died, they could all see it. These people from the Fire Guild subconsciously looked in the direction of the damage. For a moment, none of the mages used their skills. That rogue was so far away from all of them, McCrae wouldn't be able to touch him in a short time. The players immediately started discussing. What's going on? Is there anyone else who hasn't returned? Captain, were you the one who made that rogue stay outside? To prevent his teammates from being suspicious, Hux immediately wanted to explain. But at this moment, in front of Hux, a warrior suddenly collapsed. 1577. A golden number appeared. This time, without Hux saying a word, everyone released their skills. The ground in front of Hux seemed to have been plowed by an excavator, and soil flew everywhere. It still didn't hit McCrae. Could this McCrae be a ghost? F***ck, this McCrae actually killed a warrior. This is the attack power of a rogue. Golden number. This is weakness attack. That's not right. Logically speaking, we should be able to sense McCrae when he's close. There must be a problem with him. Captain, let's go. This McCrae is too strange. That's right. Captain. The corners of Hux's eyes twitched when he heard his teammates. He couldn't help but admire McRae's strength. He immediately roared. "All of you shut up. This McRae just wants us to mess up. He's not a god. If his strength was really that strong, would he keep ambushing? Pay attention to what's in front of you. If it wasn't for the reveal skill stopping just now, would McRae have had the chance to approach? What are you waiting for? Show me your reveal skills and reveal him." With that said, Hux first released a reveal skill. Following Hux's words and skills, the other players caught up. It allowed the Iron Bucket array to continue operating. Although the team wasn't in a mess, Hux's heart was in a mess. He couldn't understand. The rogue was clearly more than 30 yards away from him. Why was the warrior beside him dead the moment that rogue died? Could it be that McRae could teleport? This game had such a skill. Chapter 66. Fire Guild. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 66. Fire Guild. McRae did have the teleportation skill. However, he still couldn't use that skill. Because that skill had a prerequisite. Furthermore, he couldn't teleport that far. Most importantly, that teleportation skill couldn't be used in stealth. Once he used that skill, stealth would automatically fail. But how did McRae do it? Limitless. He used limitless bow and arrow. The release of the bow and arrow meant that the sound was not meant to be heard. Furthermore, the wind in the valley was very strong. The wind that blew back directly covered the sound of the arrows. Taking advantage of everyone's attention, McRae went up and stabbed. Warriors didn't have many weaknesses. If this warrior's back was outside, McRae could still use backstab, and the attack power of that skill could directly double. As for the warriors surrounding the Iron Bucket formation, McRae naturally had no use for backstab. He couldn't use backstab. With his current attack power, he might not even be able to kill it in one hit. McRae never gambled on such matters. To be safe, McRae chose a weak point attack. This warrior's equipment was undoubtedly very good. After all, they were the first tier of the Fire Guild. However, McRae still found the warrior's weakness. This warrior did not have an armor skirt. The effect of the skirt armor was usually not very useful in players' PK. After all, most of the attacks were aimed at the front. However, when facing rogues, the use of the skirt armor was very obvious. Rogues' daggers could be used at every opportunity. And a warrior without skirt armor was no different from an ordinary mage. It was just that warriors had thicker HP. The damage received under the crotch was naturally a weak point attack. So, McRae could attack with a golden weakness. Barton couldn't see McRae's attack clearly. After all, the distance was too far. However, when he saw a warrior being killed, Barton's heart clenched. After all, the warrior was dead, which meant that the captain was already beside them. A large number of skills were thrown out by the members of the Fire Guild. At that time, Barton didn't even blink. Only when he saw that no damage numbers appeared in the scene did he heave a sigh of relief. Forget it. Captain isn't a rash person. I don't have to worry at all. By the way, this is the best opportunity, right? Barton thought about the problem that McRae had left behind. It was indeed time to leave. However, Barton felt that there was no need. These people had almost no resistance under the captain. Furthermore, they didn't seem to have discovered him. And he wouldn't be a burden to the team leader. Continue watching for a while. Maybe you can learn something useful from Captain's actions. Barton thought for a moment and continued to stay in the tree. Actually, his thoughts were not wrong. He really couldn't see how McRae used the skill. However, he could look at the overall situation. One could objectively see the changes in the entire scene. Perhaps he still couldn't figure it out. However, when he grew up to a certain point, he would understand the intentions behind McRae's actions. The ambush in Hunter Spirit Hill was arranged by the president of the Fire Guild. Apart from the president, only the people who took action knew about this matter. Hux was only the leader now. If this mission was done, then his status in the Fire Guild would be raised to that of a team leader. Therefore, for the sake of this mission, he used all his abilities. As for the president of the Fire Guild, in order to fool people, he was currently issuing a dungeon exploration. This matter was originally a secret. However, this secret didn't seem to be a secret anymore. Swag of the Red Mountain Guild had arrived at the valley entrance. More than 10 experts had gathered beside Swag. As the president of the Red Mountain Guild, it was reasonable to say that Swag's level should be very high. However, he was only level 7 now. This level wasn't even considered a second-tier power in this game. However, this didn't affect his status. After all, he controlled the economy of the Red Mountain Financial Group. With the economy, his subordinates could quickly level up. Thus, there was no one who refused to submit to him. Actually, the more than 10 experts besides Swag had never appeared in the Red Mountain Guild. This team had been silently developing. If not for the sake of obtaining McRae's Lubbock sword, he didn't plan on using this team. At this moment, in the temporary team, a Gale rogue was reporting the situation. President, McRae has instantly killed a warrior, but I still can't see his figure. The Gale rogue spoke quickly. But Swag heard it very clearly. Although Swag hadn't played games for long, he still had a very thorough understanding of this game. Every day, he would take 2 hours to read the intelligence collected by the people below. For all kinds of information, he didn't even hesitate to spend a lot of money to collect them. Level wasn't important to him. What was important was his understanding of the game. A few minutes later, the voice of the Gale rogue sounded again in the temporary team. McRae has appeared. He took the initiative to charge at the members of the Fire Guild. It seems that his magic resistance is very high. The explosive fire ring only dealt 48 points of damage to him. His speed is very fast, at least twice as fast as mine. Oh no, he's running towards me. The Gale rogue fell silent after saying that. It was as if he could no longer care about speaking and had to deal with it with all his might. Although there was no message, Swag had given the order. Go and get his silver grade back. Swag said lightly. The Lubbock sword seemed to be embedded in McRae's body. Yes. More than 10 people replied quickly. Not long after, the 10+ people disappeared at the entrance of the valley. Silver grade was undoubtedly very important. With the silver grade, Swag could be the first to establish a guild. He knew very well why McRae had obtained the silver grade but hadn't established a guild. Because McRae didn't have enough manpower. If he wanted to establish a guild, he needed at least 10 people. Those without 10 people weren't even qualified to form a guild. This kind of thing usually didn't happen. But McRae was different. What he wanted was elites. Therefore, he delayed the establishment of a guild. This undoubtedly gave Swag a chance. Fire Guild. You never expected me to know your plan, right? With that, Swag walked into the valley. He planned to record the entire show. Then, let everyone see that the expert player in your eyes, McRae, was only so. Chapter 67. Hux's Plan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 67. Hux's Plan. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Facing the attacks of more than 10 people, McRae was like a small boat in the sea. If he made a slight mistake, his health would immediately hit rock bottom. However, such a situation would not happen to him. Everyone's skills were within his calculations. Making full use of his speed and attack power, McRae kept wandering among the players. At this moment, seeing that his group of people couldn't hurt McRae, Hux's brain worked quickly. He continuously released his skills. At the same time, Hux began typing in the team chat. "You knights, slowly gather together. Pay attention not to be discovered by him. Don't release the warrior's taunt for the time being. Do it when you hit him. Put the halo of war to the knights. When I give the order to charge, all the knights will charge together." When Hux typed, everyone understood what he meant. Unlike fighting monsters, McCrae wouldn't attack just because a player had a high damage output. They could only use hard control against him. The knight's charge was undoubtedly a very good starting skill. Although McCrae was very fast. But, when the few knights charged together, he would definitely be stunned. Perhaps the stun time was very short. But once the warrior's taunt was in place, the problem would be simple. The crowd's control skills could keep up. Not everyone could handle a team of more than 10 people. At least in the early stages of this game, even McCrae would be defeated on the spot when he was attacked by this set of skills. McCrae couldn't see the exchange within the Fire Guild. However, McCrae was gradually getting warm. He felt the pressure. The skills of more than 10 people kept flying past him. Every time, he barely dodged. When an area effect skill was unavoidable, he could always find the most suitable position. At this moment, for McCrae, it was as if he was dancing on a needle. Although he had seen such things many times in the past. However, later on, with the attributes and equipment abilities, McCrae gradually stopped caring about those control skills. But the current him did not possess that ability. Therefore, he had to rely on his own strength to resolve this. Remember the skills released by everyone and mark them. Everyone's skill CD was what McCrae relied on at this moment. He was like a butterfly flying in the fire. Am I reaching my limit? Sensing his operation, McCrae muttered. At this moment, McCrae didn't give up. Instead, the operation became even more extreme. It had been a long time since he had experienced such a smell. The rapid memory and calculation made McCrae's brain burn. After the game fused with the world, operating the game had become human instinct. And now, he was still using the keyboard. The reflexes that he had forgotten could only be completely released in extreme situations. He needed that extreme situation. Even if he died, he would not hesitate. Limitless, sword. McCrae let out a low cry as Limitless changed forms in his hands. He was getting more and more excited as he flew among the many players. His heart was beating rapidly. The adrenaline kept pumping. His hands moved quickly on the keyboard. The 2 fingers on the mouse seemed to have stopped moving. No. It was only because his 2 fingers were moving back and forth between the edges of pressing and not pressing. The high-level slight switch gave him room to play. So, the 2 fingers looked like they hadn't moved at all. There are still 2 priests. In his rapid operation, McCrae didn't forget his original intention. The priests had to die. If the priests didn't die, the damage he caused wouldn't be very useful. The recovery speed of the 2 priests didn't seem very strong. However, they could usually stop their teammates from dying. As the saying went, a warrior could be left alone, but a priest had to die. When dealing with a team, the priest would definitely be the first to die. Furthermore, the team's commander was usually this type of support. Because they had to see the overall situation. Their status was very important. The situation on the battlefield was changing rapidly. Although Hux had a good idea. But how could McCrae not see it? However, he didn't stop the knights from moving. He didn't seem to have discovered Hux's plan. A minute later, the few knights were about to gather. At this moment, the corners of McCrae's mouth moved slightly. A priest lost his guardian. Taking advantage of the moment, Limitless in McCrae's hand turned into a dagger. The next moment. Backstab. .877. A red number flew above the priest's head. Without stopping, when the priest fell, McCrae was already opposite a warrior. It was as if he hadn't killed that priest at all. Not far away, Barton felt his blood boil as he watched from the tree. He wished he could immediately join the battle. McCrae fought more than 10 players alone. Barton had only dared to think about this in his dreams before. He did not expect to be able to witness such a thing with his own eyes. Looking at McCrae flying among the players, Barton's eyes were almost fixed on him. Seeing the danger, he clenched his fists and wanted nothing more than to rush forward and beat the few mages who were hiding in the middle to death. Seeing that a few players had fallen for McCrae's scheme, he was extremely happy and hurriedly applauded. At this moment, Barton's heart was completely attracted to McCrae. He forgot to observe their surroundings. At this moment, there were already 3 people under the tree where he was. These 3 were not just anyone. It was Mark and his teammates. The strength of Mark and the other 2 had obtained McCrae's approval. As a Gale rogue, Mark's observation skills were undoubtedly very strong. He had discovered Barton in the tree very early. They had come to greet Barton. But at this moment, the situation on the battlefield attracted the 3 of them. That it made them have no time to care about Barton's thoughts. Although McCrae's operation looked like he was a warrior, Mark saw some abilities that he could use. As a Gale rogue, Mark pursued speed, concealment, and critical hits. Although it was called a rogue, the damage output of the Gale rogues was definitely very high. In a team that fought a dungeon, the damage output of the Gale rogues could usually reach the output of various mages. Close combat was very dangerous. Danger also brought about very high benefits. If a rogue's damage output could reach the top 3 of a dungeon, then this rogue was already a figure that everyone was fighting to have. Before this, Mark's ability had reached this stage. This was what made him very proud. Furthermore, not only was his damage output high, he could also dodge most of the boss damage. In the eyes of the priests, such rogues were very good teammates. Priest Mary was subdued by him because of Mark's ability. However, at this moment, Mark saw his limit. In McCrae's operation, he saw his own shortcomings. Chapter 68. Mark's appearance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 68. Mark's appearance. Chapter 68. Mark's appearance. It can even be done this way. Looking at McCrae's operation, Mark's eyes lit up. Although Mark had already seen McCrae's strength. However, at that time, he only understood the difference. And he wasn't sure where the problem was. At this moment, he vaguely felt this feeling. This intensified his desire to join the McCrae guild. Only by joining McCrae's guild could he touch his limit. Barton was a knight. Knights were very useful when fighting in dungeons. However, the current players didn't know how to PK with other players in Divine Domain. At this moment, McCrae didn't use the knight skill. However, Barton could see that the knights had used the wrong skills. Every time McCrae dodged the knight's skill, it proved that the timing of the knight's skill was wrong. Furthermore, this wasn't just a matter of the timing of the knight's skill being released. The direction, predictions, skill continuation, and so on were all key. Barton vaguely felt this point, but he couldn't think of a solution. Just as he was thinking with his head lowered, he saw the 3 people on the ground. It was Mark and the others. Originally, Barton had only sent Mark a message. He didn't expect Mark to come at all. But now Mark had appeared. When they were in the dungeon, Barton had already seen that Mark and the other 2 were actually very strong. Although McCrae made it sound worthless, that was within his high standards. Amongst the ordinary players, Mark and the others' abilities were definitely the best. When he saw Mark and the others, he immediately climbed down the maple tree. The 3 of them had clearly heard his voice. However, they ignored Barton. He was still looking at McCrae's situation on the battlefield. They were still looking at McCrae's situation on the battlefield. He seemed to be analyzing the whole time. Mark. You, Barton spoke at the inappropriate time. Warrior Jerry waved his hand to signal for Barton to stop talking. Looking at their condition, Barton didn't say anything. The situation on the battlefield changed rapidly. After McCrae killed another mage, he suddenly sped up. In a moment, he was gone. Clearly, he had entered stealth again. He watched as McCrae disappeared. Under Mark's signal, the four of them quietly touched the back of a relatively large maple tree. At this moment, Mark didn't say anything. Instead, he pulled Barton into the regional chat group. The situation isn't too good now. Mark sent a message. This was obviously for Barton to see. Looking at the words Mark sent out, Barton turned and looked at Mark, his eyes filled with question marks. Still. Just as Mark was about to send the next sentence, the four of them were pulled into his chat group by McCrae. He looked at the chat group that suddenly appeared. Mark froze. It was only when he saw McCrae in the chat group that he heaved a sigh of relief. Thankfully, no one else had discovered him. Right on the heels of that, a message appeared in the chat group. Hide. The people of the Red Mountain Guild are here. McCrae had sent this message. This simple sentence undoubtedly revealed a lot of information. Looking at the appearance of the chat group, Mark's first thought was how McCrae had discovered them. Although it wasn't far and they weren't on the tree, however, the place where Mark and the others were just now was behind a large bush. Besides, McCrae was still constantly fighting the members of the Fire Guild. They can still discover us under such circumstances. Are you even human? Mark couldn't figure it out. A dozen people against one. A skill was released every 2 seconds, and a normal attack every second. In a battle like this where he danced on the tip of a blade, he could actually spare some attention to observe other places. Was he a monster or a freak? Regardless, McCrae was definitely not normal. Another problem. Although he saw people from other forces, he could only tell that they were experts. How did McCrae tell that it was someone from the Red Mountain Guild? Were there marks on their brains? Or did McCrae actually have a very powerful intelligence network? There were even more things that Mark couldn't figure out. Previously, Mark only thought that McCrae was an expert. And now, he realized that he had only seen the tip of the iceberg. How many more secrets did McCrae have? Mark's curiosity was completely aroused by McCrae. The terrain in the canyon was usually complicated and varied. It was the same in Hunting Spirit Hill. In this valley, there were usually no monsters. Once they entered the interior of Hunter Spirit Hill, the number of monsters would slowly increase. In such a wild battle, reasonable use of the terrain and monsters was undoubtedly the benchmark of an excellent PK player. If it was only the members of the Fire Guild, McCrae naturally did not need to use monsters. And with the addition of the Red Mountain Guild, he had to use it. However, the initial deduction was that the people of Red Mountain Guild and the people of the Fire Guild were not together. After all, when he was fighting the Fire Guild, the people of the Red Mountain Guild were watching the show. It seemed like they wanted to reap the benefits. McCrae, who had entered stealth mode, caused great pressure on the Fire Guild. At this moment, Hux frowned. McCrae disappeared. He was confused. Had the Knight's formation been discovered? Otherwise, why would McCrae suddenly leave? Or were we too strong just now? Hux shook his head and moved the thought away. Soon, he thought of 2 possibilities. 1. McCrae was done with his potions. Changing the skills of various classes continuously, McCrae's consumption was naturally huge. Without the MP, he couldn't use his skills anymore. So he had to leave. Second, McCrae had discovered his intentions. He didn't want to fight his team openly anymore. However, the first possibility was quickly rejected by Hux. McCrae was a very smart player, and his abilities were very fierce. And he knew very well what danger he would encounter here. In that case, the consumption he brought was obviously enough. So there could only be one possibility. Just as Hux was about to conclude, he saw a damage value not far away. 993. This value was obviously done by McCrae. After all, at this stage, only he could cause such damage. There's someone over there. Hux frowned. The next moment, he gave an order to a rogue. Not long after, there was one less person from the Fire Guild. Soon, the rogue sent a message. Another team appeared in the valley. From the information of this team, they didn't seem to belong to any guild. This team of experts seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Chapter 69. Winthorn Boar Boss. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 69. Winthorn Boar Boss. The people from the Fire Guild were not the only ones who saw the damage values. Mark and the others saw it at the same time. Seeing this value, Mark didn't even need to think about it and knew instantly that it was McCrae who did the damage. Mark subconsciously wanted to get closer and watch. But before Mark could say what he thought, McCrae seemed to have expected what these people might do. In the chat group, McCrae immediately sent a message. Don't come over, find a high position to hide. McCrae didn't explain why. But Mark immediately understood his purpose. Find a high position to hide in. Mark had already read McCrae's thoughts from those words. In Hunter's Spirit Hill, there was a certain type of monster. Winthorn Boar. As long as they passed through this canyon, the monster would be easy to see. This Winthorn Boar was not an ordinary monster, but a mission monster. Typically, quest monsters would easily drop quest items. What the Winthorn Boars dropped was their weapon, the Winthorn Boar Thorn. Mark and the others had done this mission before. Because the rewards were very rich, the three of them had passed this mission more than 10 times. However, at the start, even though Mark was very strong, they were still wiped out once. Because monsters like the Winthorn Boar were too sensitive in terms of the aggro mechanic. As long as they showed their heads slightly, the dozen or so Winthorn Boars would start charging forward like locusts. They weren't given a chance to escape. The three of them had to test it a few times before they discovered a way to attract a Winthorn Boar alone. This method was actually very simple. Just use a piece of beef with honey to attract a Winthorn Boar. Killing them one by one was not difficult at all. Mark and the other two could do it very easily. What they were most afraid of was an entire group of Winthorn Boars. Once the number of these things reached more than 20, even if Mark and the others were already more than level 10, they would still die. It was obvious how fierce this monster was. There was an important thing in the message that McCrae sent. He wanted them to find a high position to hide in. Actually, it was because of this that Mark guessed McCrae's thoughts. That was because they had previously hid in a tree to avoid a group of Winthorn Boars. Monsters like Winthorn Boars had a common characteristic with livestock pigs. He couldn't raise his neck. There was a saying that pigs couldn't see the sky. This wasn't a joke. As long as the height was reached, they really couldn't see above them. Let's go. Up the tree. Mark waved and immediately started climbing the tree. Seeing Mark's actions, the priest and warrior didn't hesitate and immediately started climbing the tree. And Barton stared, not understanding what Mark meant at all. However, seeing their actions, he also followed them up the tree. Anyway, their skills were unquestionable. He would definitely be able to do it with them. And then there was McCrae. After killing a mage of the Red Mountain Guild, McCrae immediately raised his shield. He didn't give them a chance. McCrae could tell from their equipment. These people were much stronger than those from the Fire Guild. After sending Mark a message, he immediately ran into the canyon. After losing track of McCrae, the people of the Red Mountain Guild immediately began to disperse. However, they weren't very scattered. Clearly, they were planning to bait McCrae's next attack and get him together. Unfortunately, their plan was destined to fail. At this moment, Swag, who was at the entrance of the valley, had also received the message. Yeah. There's no problem with this plan, but you have to pay attention to the people from the Fire Guild. Although those people aren't that strong, that Hux still has some ability. It's not a bad thing to think more. Swag listened to the leader's report and gave his opinion. Analyzing the situation had always been Swag's advantage. After some thought, Swag decided to go in and take a look. At most, he would be killed by McCrae once. His level was low anyway, so it didn't matter if he killed him. With this thought in mind, Swag walked into the valley calmly. At this moment, McCrae had crossed the canyon. Looking at the familiar terrain, the corners of McCrae's mouth subconsciously revealed a smile. In the past, he had harmed many people here. He had thought that this place was no longer going to be used again. Yet, it just so happened to be of use now. Perfect, let's kill both guilds. After muttering, McCrae immediately rushed to a high position. Limitless, gun. In McCrae's hand, Limitless instantly turned into a bronze flintlock. Luring monsters was a technical ability. This was publicly acknowledged by the players. How many monsters to pull, how to pull, which direction to start fighting from. There was a lot of science involved. However, that was only for those with a goal. It was too easy to attract aggro. However, if he wanted to trap the people of the Fire Guild and the Red Mountain Guild, it was naturally impossible using just mere dozens of Windthorn boars. It was best to find a Windthorn boar boss. As long as there was a boss, these people would definitely not be able to escape. In order to find the boss of the Windthorn boars, McCrae directly climbed up the tree. On the big trees, he kept wandering. Although the Windthorn boars on the ground were already very dense, but because these monsters couldn't look up, McCrae wouldn't be discovered. Even though he knew about this disability of the Windthorn boar, McCrae didn't let his guard down. After all, divine domain was very real. When these monsters were standing, they couldn't see the top. However, these Windthorn boars still sit down. That's right. The Windthorn boar could sit down. Like a dog. As long as the Windthorn boar sat down, it would be able to see him from this angle. At the same time, if the boar was sleeping sideways, the angle of its eyes would allow it to look up. And once they discovered the target, the Windthorn boar's spikes would attack. Even McCrae would have a hard time avoiding those thorns. Hard work paid off. After wandering on the tree for a period of time, McCrae finally saw a Windthorn boar boss that looked very delicious. Without hesitation, he fired. Bang! The sound of the flintlock echoed in the forest. A .103 number flew above the head of the Windthorn boar. Without hesitation, McCrae immediately ran. Even though his speed was already very fast, he was still hit by several Windthorn boars. His HP decreased by more than 400. In the valley, the Fire Guild and the Red Mountain Guild were still looking for McCrae. What they didn't know was that a black flood was pouring into the valley. In front of the black torrent, their target, McCrae, was running happily. Chapter 70. Full in mass. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 70. Full in mass. Chapter 70. Full in mass. Leading the Windthorn boar boss, McCrae's speed was raised to the limit. After all, this was a boss. Its speed was, of course, not something ordinary small monsters could compare to. Furthermore, the speed of the Windthorn boar was not slow to begin with. Even if it was the fast Knight Barton, he might already be dead. Originally, McCrae's plan was to lure one Windthorn boar boss along with dozens of Windthorn boars. This number was almost enough to kill all the members of the Fire Guild and the Red Mountain Guild. However, to McCrae's surprise, there were quite a number of Windthorn boars this time. There were already more than 100. This number of Windthorn boars had almost guaranteed the death of the two guilds. As he pulled the monsters, McCrae kept healing himself. Although these monsters couldn't catch up to him, he couldn't pull them away. Therefore, he would constantly withstand the attacks of the windthorn boar. Not long after, McCrae led all the monsters into the canyon. Soon, large amounts of smoke and dust were kicked up. It was as if an army was attacking. At this moment, on the tree, Mark and the others were the first to notice this abnormality. Looking at the smoke and dust, Barton was somewhat puzzled. "What's going on over there?" He sent his doubts to the chat group. You still don't know what happened?" Mark typed. "What happened? Did I miss something?" "Alright. Let me tell you." Mark didn't stop typing. "Mark. The message that McCrae sent us just now was a warning. As for you, you might not have done that mission before, so you don't know what's so strange about this place." Actually, Mark carefully told Barton what he knew. After a while, Barton finally understood the problem. Then, an excited smile suddenly appeared on his face. In the chat group, he immediately sent a message. "Does this mean that almost no one from the Fire Guild can survive?" Mark replied simply. In Mark's opinion, he had already made it very clear to him. There was no need to answer such a question. After all, anyone who saw a group of windthorn boars would feel their scalps tingle. He didn't think about Mark's thoughts. Barton was happy. After all, anyone would be unhappy to be chased by a guild member. Although Barton had always told McCrae not to come, he still hoped that these people would die once. Actually, Barton would be happy every time McCrae killed a member of the Fire Guild. However, he did not expect this group of people chasing after him to be wiped out completely, just like that. And now, the expert Mark actually said that they could be wiped out. He was obviously very happy. He was happy for a while. Barton was suddenly touched. He hadn't been in contact with McCrae for long. In this short period of contact, it was reasonable if the other party didn't come save him. Especially since it was so dangerous. Even though he knew that there were a bunch of experts on the other side, McCrae still ignored his safety to save him. This was enough to move him. Although this was just a game. At this moment, Barton had already acknowledged McCrae from the bottom of his heart. No matter how smart McCrae was, he couldn't think of what Barton was thinking. At this moment, what McCrae faced was a large group of windthorn boars. And in front of him, the people from the Fire Guild had already appeared. McCrae had expected this. The goal of the Fire Guild was the silver-grade weapon in his possession. As long as they obtained this silver-grade, they could immediately register a guild. Even if all of them died, the people of the Fire Guild wouldn't feel that it was a pity. Because of this. That was why McCrae could openly lure the windthorn boar boss. Otherwise, if he lured the monster over, the other party wouldn't just take the hit. Then he would really be useless. Although McCrae was in danger of being attacked from both sides, he didn't panic at all. Although the goal was to let the people of the Fire Guild die, he didn't run straight towards the members of the Fire Guild. After all, he had to get away. If he didn't turn, he might really die here. In front of him, the big maple tree on the right was where McCrae would get away. Because he had planned it from the start, McCrae didn't need to think. He began to lead the windthorn boar army to turn. However, just as he was about to enter the maple tree's range, he vaguely discovered a trace. There seemed to be someone there. McCrae was instantly on guard. Looking at the people of the Fire Guild in front of him, McCrae instantly understood. It could be seen that the Fire Guild and the Red Mountain Guild had temporarily formed an alliance. Their goal was to kill him. "Do you think I only have one plan?" McCrae sneered softly. Without stopping, he immediately ran to the side of the valley. In the valley, other than the big tree, there was another way to escape the aggro of the windthorn boar. That was the cliff wall of the valley. The canyon at the entrance of Hunter Spirit Hill looked very narrow. However, the valley was not man-made. Therefore, there was always a spacious place in the valley. The section in front of McCrae was relatively spacious. Apart from the fire guild at the front, there was a big maple tree at the side. The big maple tree seemed to be more advantageous for McCrae. However, the cliff wall wasn't that difficult. As long as he controlled it well, McCrae wouldn't be afraid even if it was a 90-degree cliff. He'd be able to climb up. Looking at McCrae's actions, Hux smiled proudly. Do you really think you've mastered this game? Naive, Hux seemed to have expected this. The smile on his face deepened at McCrae's actions. Swag, who was beside Hux, was expressionless. In his opinion, such a small plan was not worth being proud of. Wasn't this expected? What was there to be proud of? Swag just watched quietly. However, as he looked at Hux, he had a feeling that this person might be of use to him. Although this person's ability wasn't high enough, he could more or less handle ordinary matters. If they were talking about divine domain, with Hux's ability, being a team leader was still not an issue. Squinting, Swag asked Hux, "Hux, how much is your monthly salary?" Hux didn't answer Swag's question immediately. Actually, he didn't have a salary in the Fire Guild. Besides, the game had only been open for a few days, so there was no mention of this. After this mission is completed, my salary will increase to about 10,000. Hux said very seriously. He knew very well that as the president of the Red Mountain Guild, Swag would not ask such a question for no reason. Although he didn't plan on abandoning the Fire Guild, knowing more wasn't a bad thing. Swag immediately smiled when he heard Hux's answer. A monthly salary of 50,000. The commission is separate. How about coming to my place? Swag threw a huge bomb.